Hey, this is Dustin, and I'm asking the question today, are we in the last days? And the first part of that question I want to ask you is just, what do you think of when you think of the last days? Now, I think the answer to that could probably vary, but most people, or at least a lot of people, I guess I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people think that the last days are the days right when Jesus comes back. So maybe in a couple weeks, or maybe even today, Jesus is going to return. But you know, the Bible actually has a very different definition of the last days. Commonly, we think of the last days, what we're living through right now, we're living through this COVID thing, and people are looking around and saying, wow, this is like a worldwide plague. Aren't there plagues in the Bible as judgment? And could this be it? This be the time of the last days? But when we go back in time a little bit, we see that in 2012, there were people, not Christians for the most part, but some people who were really convinced that the Mayan calendar predicted the end of the world. We've seen cult groups believe that the end of the world was upon them, and they did very drastic and in sometimes lethal things because of it. During 9/11, there were people who believed that it was the last days. In Y2K 2000, people believed that the end of the world could be coming. And every generation deals with this. It's been over 10 years ago now that I saw a preacher on television say, well, the signs of the times show us that the rapture must be taking place soon, within the next 3 years or less. And that was over 10 years ago he said that, and as far as I know, he's still on television predicting the same thing. But I want you to look with me in Acts chapter 2, and I think it's very instructive because in Acts chapter 2 we have people who are listening to the preaching. They're seeing these mighty works of God, and they're wondering what in the world is going on. And in verse 14, it says, Peter, standing with the 11, lifted up his voice and addressed them, Men of Judea and all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and give ear to my words. For these people are not drunk, as you suppose, since it is only the third hour of the day. But this is what was uttered through the prophet Joel. And in the last days it shall be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, your old men shall dream dreams. Even on my male servants and female servants in those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the day of the Lord comes, the great and magnificent day. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. He then goes on to explain that Jesus himself and what he just did in his first coming is the fulfillment of this. So he says, okay, this is what Joel spoke about in the last days. This would happen. Peter tells that to people, and from where we're looking, that's 2,000 years ago. And so the last days have been in existence for over 2,000 years. Now, does that mean that Jesus is not coming soon? No. Does that mean that he couldn't come today? No. Does that mean that he will come today? Well, the answer is that is also no. And I want to talk a little bit about that next time. But in the meantime, I want you to understand, even if Jesus doesn't come for the world, he could come for you today. And you need to be ready, because it is appointed for all men once to die and then to face the judgment. But as far as the world coming to an end, as far as us being in the last days, well, we've been in them for a long time. And the good news is that Jesus has been at work through all that time.